Hello and welcome to the Game Theory Podcast. I'm your host, Sam Vicini. We're presented by CLNS Media. Today on the show, we've got good friend of the program, Ricky O'Donnell, making his triumphant return to the podcast because, hey, the Bulls made some news yesterday. They decided to fire Fred Hoiberg and I guess move in the direction of Jim Boylan because that's a thing that people do. Before we get into all of that, Ricky, how's it going, man? How is life in Chicago right now?
Life is great in Chicago right now. The Bulls are a huge burden on my life in general, but it's okay. There's some decent pieces. Lauri Markkanen's coming back. That's going to give us a reason to watch. Wendell Carter's been solid. I'm really interested to see how him and Markkanen play off each other. So life's good, despite the fact that, the Bulls keep making mistake after mistake, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, we should absolutely talk about the Bulls just making mistake after mistake. We're going to talk a little bit about the NBA in general and a little bit about the draft at the end because Ricky covers the draft over at SB Nation as well. Our sponsors today are X-Bar and Simple Contacts, two favorites of the Game Theory Podcast for sure. We'll read some ads here in the middle of the show. But Ricky, what was your initial reaction yesterday whenever you see the news? Hey, Fred Hoiberg is no longer going to be the Chicago Bulls basketball coach. He lasted, if I remember correctly, 3 years and 24 games?
Yeah. I was not surprised that the Bulls fired him mid-season. That was something we were talking about even from the onset of the year. One of the biggest questions this season was would Hoiberg make it through the year? Would he get fired midway through the season? You thought that maybe all the injuries the Bulls had would be good for Hoiberg in terms of keeping his job. Lauri Markkanen hurt, at the onset of training camp, so he hadn't played a game. Then you have Denzel Valentine missing the full year. Bobby Portis only played a handful of games. Chris Dunn, I believe, played one game. So when you're down 4 rotation pieces, 3 starters, you would think perhaps that would bide Hoiberg some time because it would be hard for the front office to evaluate, just how well he was doing with this young core when almost all of the young core wasn't there. What was really odd to me, though, was the timing of this. Markkanen comes back, plays 1 game against the Rockets, comes off the bench, struggles a bit, scores 10 points. Hoiberg shows up the next day thinking he's running practice, and the Bulls have already fired him. They let Jim Boylan know the night before that he was going to be the new head coach, that Hoiberg was going to be gone. So I think the timing was odd. The way they handled it was odd. It comes back to even the way they fired Thibodeau when they put out one of the most tone-deaf press releases you'll ever find. So I think that, Hoiberg, you can argue the Hoiberg thing, it has a lot of multiple sides, right? You can argue that, the Bulls never gave him the correct pieces to really implement the system he was hired to run in the first place. You can say it was unfair to fire him when he hasn't had 4 key rotation pieces and 3 starters this year. At the same time, he got the job without a real coaching search. He was kind of handpicked from the very start. The Bulls sort of lied about having a nationwide coaching search.
A nationwide coaching search that stretched all the way to Ames, Iowa, and Ames, Iowa, because of Gar Forman and the Iowa State connection.
It's true. So, from that regard, he never really did anything to prove that he deserved the job, that he could be, a long-term NBA head coach. So it's a tough situation. I mean, I do think that Hoiberg gets it from a basketball perspective. He did some things this year that I really liked in terms of his coaching. But, yeah, I mean, I don't think that Bulls fans are crying to lose Fred Hoiberg. It's just the way they handled it is just so weird and strange. It just doesn't give you a lot of faith in the front office moving forward, I don't think.
So, yeah, let's talk about Hoiberg first, and then we'll talk about the front office because, well, everything leads back there in a lot of ways. Hoiberg in general, he was a guy that started to get discussion in regard to NBA coaching jobs, I would say starting in 2014, really. The summer of 2014, he stayed at Iowa State one more year and then obviously gets the Bulls job. And it was considered a very real potential outcome that he would have gotten another job. If it was a Bull, if it wasn't the Bulls, it was probably going to be someone else at some point. Because the thing with Hoiberg is that everyone says, and it's why I'm I think that there's a chance he goes back to college, but why I think everyone is kind of jumping the boat on that just a touch is that he is not a guy who loves to recruit. Like he doesn't love that rat race of trying to like go out, identify kids, find kids, convince them to come, convince 18-year-olds to come. He built Iowa State on transfers. And like he's been pretty open about not really wanting to deal with that. He wants to just coach basketball. So the NBA always felt like a pretty real and good outcome for him. The problem is that in the 3 years that he was there, I don't think he ever elevated what was happening around him. I agree with you that Hoiberg never got a chance, really, to be successful. He never got a chance to implement the scheme that he wanted in a competent way, in large part because the front office, which is so inexorably linked here to the failings of the Bulls over the last decade and a half. The front office here didn't really ever put him in position to where he could run the scheme he wants competently. But look, like on some level, he's an offensive-minded coach who ended up with like the 29th ranked offense. They have a 97 offensive rating over the course of their last 10 games. They're not getting better. Injuries hurt them this year, and it's probably unfair that he got fired right now. If you were going to fire him, you would probably wait to see what happens whenever, as you mentioned, Lowry gets back and as he plays with Wendell Carter and as Chris Dunn gets back and they have an actual real point guard with a pulse. Like there's a lot of like they're starting Ryan Arcidiacono right now and like giving him 40 minutes in like multiple games. I mean, what are we doing here on some level with the Bulls front office? But like there is something to be said for the fact that the people that the front office, the players that the front office put in front of him, he never elevated. And the players that were there now, according to Darnell Mayberry with The Athletic, started to like undermine him. And Fred is not a guy who's going to be like super disciplinarian. He's not going to be a guy who really goes crazy, just like, you know, suspending guys and sitting guys for the rest of the games. You know, he expects people to be professionals. He expects people to be people who can, you know, just kind of act in a manner commensurate with playing in the NBA. And, you know, a lot of guys just kind of aren't there, especially whenever they're younger players. And the Bulls right now have the second youngest roster in the NBA.
Yeah, Fred got off to a really bad start from the beginning. He inherited a Thibodeau team that was very much built for like the Thibodeau ethos of defense first, stacked front court, a lot of proud veterans. Well, you know, Thibodeau took that team, if you remember, in his last year to the second round of the playoffs. That's when they were playing the Cavs. They went up 2-1. They would have been up 3-1, but LeBron hits a dagger corner three. That was when David Blatt drew up a play for him to inbound the ball, and LeBron said, no. LeBron ends up taking the game-winning shot.
Basically told David Blatt, fuck yo couch, and then walked out and then nailed a three. It was amazing.
So, you know, if the Bulls win that game up 3-1, you know, there's just so much that goes into it, right? Like, basically, Hoiberg from the very onset just didn't really command the respect of the team. You had Jimmy Butler saying he needs to coach harder. Then you had the three alphas year when there was so much tension in the locker room between Butler and Wade versus the rest of the younger players on the roster, culminating in Rajon Rondo's epic Instagram post where he said, my vets would never call out the team publicly like that when this was after a game, I believe it was against Atlanta, when Butler and Wade just went ham. They were killing it, carrying the offense, combined for like 70 points or something. But like, you know, the role players on the team missed some shots down the stretch, and they just blasted everyone in the locker room right after the game. Right from that point, and that was Hoiberg's second year, you could just tell that he was going to have trouble handling the strong personalities in the NBA. I will say that time does give him a little benefit here because, yes, Jimmy Butler didn't respect Fred Hoiberg. Does Jimmy Butler respect anyone? It doesn't really seem like it. So it was tough for Hoiberg to, be that force that could bring everyone together. He just wasn't really cut out for that from the very start. Butler walked all over him. As soon as Butler got away with it once, he knew he could do it forever. Wade came in as, just a Hall of Famer with a huge ego who was making a ton of money, who was basically like the dude riding in on a white horse, the hometown hero, to try to bring the Bulls back to competency. Now, if you remember in that 3 Alphas year, they were up 2-0 on the Celtics in that first round series. Rondo gets hurt. They end up losing the series in 6 games. So right from that very moment, Hoiberg's days were numbered.
Well,
After that,
here's when I think I knew that Hoiberg's days were numbered. It was the summer before that. It was whenever they decide to say, hey, we're going to go out, we're going to try and sign athletes, and we're going to try and play in Fred's pace and space style. We're going to try and get up and down the floor. And they kind of succeeded for the first 2.5 weeks of free agency. It was like, you know what, the Bulls they're being kind of competent. They're figuring some things out. And then they signed Rajon Rondo and Dwayne Wade, and then they trade right before the season Tony Snell for Michael Carter-Williams, and there's no pace and space anymore because all of those guys want to hold the ball, and none of them, no one on the team even, can shoot at that stage. I don't remember if the Bulls ended up having the worst 3-point percentage in the league that year. It had to be damn close, though. That's when I knew there's no synergy here between the front office and Fred Hoiberg. And Hoiberg's scheme particularly is one where you need a lot of synergy between the coaching staff and the front office.
You basically hired Hoiberg for a system and then undercut the system at every opportunity you got. So I'm not really crying for Hoiberg here because, I don't know. Maybe he could have been an average NBA head coach. Perhaps he will get another job one day. He's still young. It could happen theoretically. And if it does, I think that, if he's given the right pieces, he certainly could be a good coach. It just wasn't going to happen in Chicago. And, you talk about the Michael Carter-Williams for Tony Snell trade. They then decided to keep Carter-Williams in training camp over Spencer Dinwiddie. Yeah. They also decided to keep Isaiah Cannon in training camp over Spencer Dinwiddie. Those are just a couple of the point guards, who they decided to keep over Dinwiddie, who's going to be one of the better free agent point guards next year. He's going to get, minimum? Well, I know his max from the Nets is $47 million, but if he hits the open market, he could even get more than that. So
yeah, his extension number, he's willing. It seems like he's willing to sign an extension with Brooklyn because he apparently wants to stay in Brooklyn. He can sign an extension starting now. He just had a big prepared statement about it last week that over at The Athletic, Mike Scotto went ahead and transcribed for us. He said, "Look, the number is 12 years, $47 million. I would love to stay in Brooklyn. We'll see where it goes." I think that you're right. I think that's even undercutting what his full marketplace is. But if Spencer is willing to sign it because he wants to stay in Brooklyn, good for him. That's life-changing money. He's one of the best stories in the NBA, and he's genuinely just an awesome dude. But I think that you're talking about a $15 million player if he hits the market this summer.
For sure. So, that was another huge misstep in the evaluation. And then it's so now what was Hoiberg really being judged on? If you listen to John Paxson's press conference yesterday, he was I didn't see the passion and the energy that was in this building, even at the end of last year. Well, not having Bobby Portis, who might be one of the most intense players in the NBA, I assume that's going to affect your intensity level in practice. Not having Chris Dunn, who is really one of the more underrated defenders in the league. Chris Dunn's a hell of a defender, even with his offensive struggles. That's going to impact the intensity of the practices and around the building. So, was Hoiberg judged on wins and losses? Because right now, if the draft lottery started today, I believe the Bulls would be fourth. Which, considering, actually, they're tied for second. I just pulled it up. So they're 5-19. The only team with a definitively worse record is Phoenix at 4-19. But still, it's people thought the Bulls would win under 30 games with a healthy lineup, let alone with the one down all these key pieces.
But here's the problem with all of this, and we'll move it into the direction of the front office now. I'll just close Hoiberg here by saying I have no idea if Fred Hoiberg is a good NBA coach. I genuinely don't know. He's not a guy that was running crazy complicated stuff, but he's one of the early adopters of understanding shot distribution and understanding the ways to get his players shots at the basket and ways to get his players shots beyond the arc. He is mostly just a spread pick and roll guy who gave the ball to DeAndre Kane, for instance, and gave the ball to Monte Morris later in his years and decided, hey, we're going to run spread pick and roll. We're going to let these guys really operate. We're going to drive and kick, and we're going to get shots at the basket. And when we can run, we're going to run. None of that stuff is reinventing the wheel, but because he emphasized threes and shots at the basket early, I think that he had a very competent offensive scheme. And this is where we see the divide in the NBA now, too, let alone in college, where it's still just an absolute mess, and why I think Hoiberg would absolutely wreck still if he went back to college. There are not enough teams out there yet that really do understand shot distribution and really do understand where the best spots are on the floor. And it seems like, given the Bulls' continued forays into free agency with the players that they sign, that John Paxson and Gar Forman are among the teams that are behind the eight ball in this regard. And I think that it goes to what you just said and why I cut you off here for a minute. It goes to what you said and what Dan Katz said yesterday over at Barstool Big Cat. I think that he put it perfectly. The problem is that John Paxson and Gar Forman think everyone is stupid around them. Like, all of the fans are stupid. And they sold this vision of, we have Jabari Parker. He was a 15, 17 point a game scorer. We have Zach LaVine. We think he can be a 25 point a game scorer. We have Lowry, who was first team all rookie last year. And we have Chris Dunn and Bobby Portis and all these young guys. We can make the playoffs this year. And then nobody who was smart thought that this was a playoff team. Nobody. But because they sold it that way, they boxed themselves into a situation where they set the expectations so high that the fans got behind it. And now they're essentially saying to the fans, hey, we're going to move in a totally different direction, and we're going to get some energy back in the building. We're going to have Jim Boylan in, who's, a guy who can really, motivate the guys, and that's going to make a big difference here. The problem is it's not going to make a big difference. The problem is that the moves that you guys have made are why the Bulls are in this situation now. They think everyone else but them is stupid, when really they're the ones who aren't good. It's like when you sit at a poker table and you can't tell who the fish is sitting across from you. You're probably the fish. John Paxson and Gar Forman are the fish.
Yeah, I honestly believe the Bulls thought they would be pretty decent this year. Like, there was, I would say, a small minority of fans who thought they could compete for the playoffs coming into the season. Meanwhile, Vegas had their over-under at like 30 wins or 27 wins. So Vegas expected them to be one of the worst teams in the league. Anyone smart thought they would be one of the worst teams in the league, but they were able to appeal to like Bears fans who barely like basketball, who thought that, maybe the Bulls have some interesting stuff going on. When you're trying to appeal to the casual fan, as they did when they signed Dwayne Wade, as they did when they signed Jabari Parker, instead of actually attempting to build the best basketball team possible, you're just predestined for failure from the very start. So I think that is a huge mistake, just at the forefront. I also just don't know how good they are at talent evaluation. And they did make good picks in Markkanen and Carter. And I think, at the end of the day, the most important aspect to team building is hitting on draft picks. If they hit another, let's say, double or triple in this next draft, even if they end up getting the 7th pick, let's just say DeAndre Hunter or someone, and he ends up being like, maybe not an all-star, but like a borderline all-star, I mean, eventually the Bulls are going to have a pretty good team. As long as they keep hitting on picks, despite all these mistakes they've made leading up to this, and getting Carter and Markkanen, I mean, that's just a really solid foundation, I think, for the rebuild, for as many problems as the Bulls have. With that being said, the same people are still in place who have made these bad decisions again and again and again, and they just keep repeating them. It kind of started with the horrible trade for Doug McDermott back in I think that was the 2014 draft.
That was genuinely just insane to me. And by the way, look who the pieces were in charge there. Greg McDermott, Doug McDermott's dad. Greg McDermott? Why is my... Yeah. Iowa State guy. He knows Gar Forman well. The scouting for the Bulls was to go get Doug McDermott. They trade like 2 very good first-round picks, like top 20 first-round picks, that end up being Yusuf Nurkic and Gary Harris for Doug McDermott at number 12. It was like number 16 and number 19 or something for number 12, which is just so dumb in so many ways that it belies comprehension to me.
Yeah, and the reason they got McDermott is because they thought he could be our Kyle Korver, when they had just given Kyle Korver away for a trade exception they never even used. So the thought process behind...
Yeah, and like you mentioned draft evaluation, right? And like I actually don't think they're terrible at the draft. I just like complained about the Doug McDermott thing, but over the years now, they've actually done pretty okay. You mentioned Lowry, you mentioned Wendell Carter. You can look at Chandler Hutchison, who I think looks pretty useful right now. You can look at the guys that, basically they got for Jimmy Butler. Lowry Markkanen here, they get Chris Dunn, they get Zach LaVine. You could basically look at those guys as like, guys that they evaluated as useful players that could eventually become good players as you do in the draft, because you got a lot of really interesting talent here. But the problem is everything else that they do. They don't know how to accentuate the talents of the players that they have around them.
Yeah. And I said this from the onset of the podcast that I thought Hoiberg gets it. I would love to talk ball with Hoiberg one-on-one off the record, not as a reporter. Just, talk about Deonte Burton a bit. Talk about Georges Niang. Like, I feel like Hoiberg, just in general, understands how you build a winning basketball team in 2018.
I agree with you. I 100% agree with that. I think that you can look at everything from the shot distribution that he had at Iowa State to some of the decisions he made this year. Like they started Wendell Carter over Robin Lopez. Like that's not a simple move for a team that, the front office thinks they're going to compete. They kind of have done a really good job, I think, giving Zach LaVine free reign to operate on offense. Now, look, I don't think anyone thinks Zach LaVine is like this future superstar on offense, but like he was certainly their best option. And I think that Fred did a pretty good job of just rolling the ball out and saying, hey, we're going to give Zach really good opportunities to score. I actually love some of the sets that Fred has run after timeouts to get Zach open looks. Like there's a lot of pretty good offensive acumen there. It's just that the roster never makes sense.
Yeah, so it's like I think Fred probably understands how to build a good, winning basketball team in this year. But does the front office? I'm not really so sure, even though they have made some good draft picks. And like I said, you keep hitting on draft picks, you're going to be all right. And if you want to talk about truly the big picture, what the Bulls are really missing right now is like a superstar perimeter player. Of course, that's like the hardest thing to acquire in the NBA. But if they were to get that person, I think LaVine falls into a secondary scoring role. He's maybe in, the Kyrie Irving role next to a LeBron. Obviously, how do you find your LeBron? It's very difficult. But I think, LaVine in a secondary scoring role next to a more complete two-way player who's initiating the offense the majority of the time, he would be really good in that role. LaVine is super talented. Like, I think people look at some of the inefficiency offensively and they look at his reputation defensively and they think, this isn't someone I really need to keep an eye on moving forward. LaVine is so slippery in the lane. He's so quick. He can finish with either hand. He's kind of got the ball on a string. As a ball handler, he's improved his passing this year. I think don't write off Zach LaVine yet. Zach LaVine, in a better situation, can be a really useful player who's going to drop 40 in playoff games. Like that dude is a walking bucket in every way. He's just not cut out to be the offensive initiator. All right, then you got Carter. Carter's one of these rare guys who I think does elevate the play of everyone around him on both ends of the floor. There's more than meets the eye to his game, I think. He might put up modest box score numbers, but his impact is greater than whatever he's putting up in the box score. So I like him. Markkanen, I don't really know what his ceiling is. It could be very high. Pure shooter is 7 feet tall. He can handle it a little bit better than I expected. He's not a total zero on defense or on the glass. All right, so if the Bulls win the lottery and get Zion, I am sitting here ripping the Bulls. I think John Paxson should be fired. He's been the GM for 15 years. It's like, who gets to hire a fifth coach in the NBA? It's him and Ernie Grunfeld. It's like, this is ridiculous. I don't think Paxson should still be around. With all that said, if they do win the lottery and they get Zion, the rebuild's going to be looking pretty damn good overnight. And then suddenly it's like, well, now maybe the Jimmy Butler trade was worth it. Now, all this angst we've had about the Bulls rebuild sort of dissipates immediately because they would have a guy who appears to be that perimeter-oriented superstar. So there's a lot of duality to this conversation on both sides, but the Bulls need talent. That's first and foremost, and they've added some good pieces through the draft the last 2 years, but they need more talent, more talent.
So I guess that where I fall on all of this is like, yeah, if they get Zion, it'll be fine. And like, yeah, if they hit the lottery, if they hit the like 5% chance that they have to get Zion, because I don't think that they're going to go like 5-19 the rest of the way here, like some of these other teams are. And because of the standard they have set, and because they think that they should be winning, I'm worried that other teams are going to start tanking around them and make this even worse for them. Like, if the Bulls end up, like, I don't think the Bulls are going to be worse than Atlanta. I don't think they're going to be worse than Cleveland. I don't think they're going to be worse than the Knicks even. So,
or Phoenix.
Yeah, of course. So
probably 5 at best.
Yeah, you're probably looking at like 5, and if you get the number 5 spot this year, that's like a 9% chance to get number 1 overall. So you're basically pinning your hopes for a John Paxson, Gar Forman front office to a like 9% chance, right? Because next year, the odds are, given just natural growth and development of this roster, they probably won't be in position for this to happen again. So this is where we're at with this front office. And like, I genuinely think it's the worst front office in the NBA. That's where I'm at right now. They have drafted well, and I still think this is the worst front office in the NBA because it's just ass backwards in terms of the way that you should be running an organization. Like, there's no free agent is going to want to go there. Like, what coach should feel confident about going to the Chicago Bulls right now? Because what coach should feel confident that the like secondary pieces that you're going to get to put on the floor around those players, the 3-and-D guys that can allow you to run the scheme that is modern and smart in the NBA, the stretch centers that they already have, actually. So like the stretch centers don't really work, but like the lead guard depth that you need to be able to sustain an offense in the NBA. What proof does a coach have that these guys can actually figure that out? What proof do we have that free agents should want to come to Chicago now to play for an organization that, despite having all of the history of Michael Jordan, has almost totally given up that cachet at this stage? Like, what free agent? Like, Chicago has max cap space this summer if they want it. You never hear.
I've been complaining about this. I complained about it on my podcast yesterday. It's like, Kevin Durant seems like he's probably going to leave the Warriors. The Knicks are being rumored as a potential team. The Knicks have been garbage for forever, for 35 years. Yet the Knicks are the team who is being, rumored because they're a big market team in the Eastern Conference with a lot of history. Who else fits that description? It's the Bulls. The Bulls have a global fan base. We can be selling Kevin Durant Bulls jerseys in China to everyone. Unfortunately, the Bulls run the team like they're the Milwaukee Bucks or like they're the Indiana Pacers. They don't think of themselves as this power player within the NBA landscape. And, we can talk about the front office, but who empowers the front office? It's ownership. And as long as the Reinsdorfs sort of value the bottom line more than winning basketball games, I think that, it's tough to have a lot of faith in the Bulls moving forward. Now, they did build a really good team not so long ago with Derrick Rose and Joakim Noah and Luol Deng and those guys. That was a slightly different era of the NBA. But this front office and this ownership did build that team. It also took a hell of a lot of luck. And I think that there's a lot of similarities in a sense between this rebuild and that rebuild. The Bulls hit on Noah at number 9. They hit on Luol Deng at number 7, sort of similar to Carter and Markkanen at number 7 for the current iteration of the team. But what was the event that was the rocket ship up to contention for the Bulls? It was hitting the lottery for Derrick Rose on a 1% chance to draft him, and then he becomes the youngest MVP, and they're in the Eastern Conference Finals, the number 1 seed in the East 2 years in a row at their peak under Tom Thibodeau. They're going to need something like that to happen again.
Yeah.
And if it doesn't happen, the drop-off, it's still early with this draft class, so I don't know. And we actually haven't even talked much draft personally, off the record, for this class, Sam, so I don't know how you're thinking about it. But I've written that it's a very top-heavy class. I think the drop-off from Zion to, let's say, Romeo Langford, or from even
Cam Reddish to Romeo Langford, I think.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's substantial.
Yeah,
So if
I'm
the
with
Bulls
you.
walk away with the 7th pick this year and get Romeo Langford, who could certainly be a good NBA player, but I think that, right there, how the hell are the Bulls going to build a contending team, which was the whole point of trading Jimmy Butler. You traded Jimmy Butler because you thought, well, Jimmy Butler can't be the best player on a championship team. That logic is just so ass backwards in the first place. But that is mostly why they made the trade. The real reason is because they didn't want to pay him this contract that he's due to be paid at the end of this summer. So anyways, whatever. Butler's gone. You can't constantly relitigate the Butler trade. At the same time, it's naturally going to happen if you can't build a team that at least has hope of being one of the top upper echelon teams in the Eastern Conference, the way Philly did with the rebuild. Now, Philly made some of the worst draft picks of the decade. I mean, Jahlil Okafor has got to be one of the worst picks, in recent draft history.
Yeah.
I mean, Fultz, Jesus.
Yeah, I don't know what to do with Fultz yet, but it's looking bad. It's looking real bad.
And yet they still have potential to be one of the best teams in the East or to, go to the finals because they gave themselves enough bites at the apple.
Right.
The Bulls in year 2 of the rebuild are already like, well, Paxson's like, I think we can make the playoffs. Why don't people think we can make the playoffs? It's like, even trying to make the playoffs, your goal is messed up from the start. Like, if you wanted to build a good team that could make the playoffs every year, build that damn team around Jimmy Butler. Have Nikola Mirotic be your secondary guy. Keep Etuan Moore. Keep Spencer Dinwiddie. You have Gary Harris and Nurkic instead of McDermott. That's a good-ass team. And then maybe you're in the position to make a trade for Kawhi Leonard or a guy like that. Or you can sign Kevin Durant. Yeah. But instead, they went with the total teardown without really being committed to it. Like, Paxson always pounds his chest. I'm such a competitor. I need the fire and the passion. Well, you had Jimmy Butler, a two-way superstar, in a team-friendly deal, and you were the one who thought that you were too stupid to build a good team around him. You threw your hands up and you gave up. You said, I'm not competent enough to build a contending team around a top 10 two-way player on an extremely team-friendly deal. I can't do this. I'm too dumb. I'm just going to sign Dwayne Wade. I'm going to sign Rajon Rondo. I'm going to undercut my own competitive fire in my own best interests for trying to sell some tickets or some shit in the short term. The whole thing is just so deeply screwed up from the top down, Sam. It's like, as long as these same people are in place, even if they're making some good draft picks, how do you have faith in them? The only thing that can save them is a superstar. And I think the only superstar in this draft, to me, is Zion. And if they don't hit that 1% chance, I don't think they're going to be in position for Anthony Edwards next year. I don't think they're going to be in position for Jalen Green 2 years from now. So it's like, I don't know how you continue to defend the front office or continue to believe that their approach is the right approach to getting the Bulls back to championship level contention.
Yeah, like there was a process involved with the 76ers. It involved getting, like, essentially the odds adding up for like a lottery pick, right? Like the lottery odds adding up to over 100% for you to get a number 1 overall pick. And number 1 overall picks often end up being what we expect of them, right? To be just absolute blanket superstars. The Bulls' process right now is to compete and then hit like a 10% chance to get the guy that they need. That is just so ass backwards to me in terms of roster building. Like, nobody cares that you win 30 games right now. The difference between winning 25 games and 35 games means like very little to an NBA organization's bottom line, and it means very little to an NBA organization's fan base. Those are the kinds of moves that John Paxson has made and that Gar Forman have made over the last 3 years, basically. Over the last, I would say basically since Hoiberg took over and they started to kind of tear things down a little bit from the Tibbs era and started to move on a little bit. So what are we doing here? That's what I come back to. Like, what are we doing here with John Paxson and Gar Forman still being in charge? It's insane to me that they still have decision-making power to make a fifth hire. Fred Hoiberg, I don't know. The Fred Hoiberg firing, what it does is it presents us a situation to discuss the failings of Gar Forman and John Paxson, I think. Just straight up. And then, you know what happened yesterday? John Paxson made sure to say Gar is absolutely safe in his job.
Yeah, to me, the fans want Gar fired, which is just hilarious that Gar has become like target.
Honestly, I don't think it's Gar. I'll just be real.
Right. I do not
think it's Gar.
I tweeted this yesterday. Nothing would change if they fired Gar.
Yeah.
Like, he's just a stooge in the stooge machine. He's a replaceable stooge. You can call up any idiot to be Gar Forman.
And you know what? Like, if we're going to say that they have a good draft record, which I think you and I are agreed upon, Gar Forman has played a pretty big role in that. They have done a good job of actually identifying talent under the Gar Forman regime. The problem is everything else. Yeah.
And, then when you miss draft picks, like Marquise Teague, well, he was the last pick in the first round, but we're still going to bring him up. Like Marquise Teague, like Denzel Valentine.
Valentine pick was bad. I'll say that.
And I liked it at the time. When it happened, I was like, yeah, he'll be able to. I mean, Denzel Valentine was putting up like 27 and 7 on high volume, efficient 3-point shooting at Michigan State. Obviously, he was a below NBA caliber athlete, but I thought perhaps he could win with his skill and his feel. That hasn't translated whatsoever. His feel isn't very good.
The problem is that he was a below average NBA athlete that was also like flagged at the combine, and like was flagged physically. I don't remember if he was flagged at the combine, but he was flagged physically by most NBA teams. So I struggle to see why that was an intelligent move.
Yeah. So that one hasn't worked out. And then like those picks go under a microscope. Even Portis is a decent player. Like, Portis could help someone. He just doesn't really have a fit on the Bulls.
That's a great pick, I think. You get Bobby Portis at number 22 or whatever. That's a great pick.
Yeah.
So, yeah, they identify talent. They just don't. There is a difference between being able to identify talent and being able to build a roster. The Bulls are good at identifying talent. They just don't know how to roster build. And until they learn how to roster build, they're not going to be successful. Just straight up. I don't think they're going to be successful.
I completely agree, Sam, and it's, it all starts from the top down. I think that's the biggest takeaway, is that Jerry Reinsdorf, he once said, baseball is a religion, basketball is just a sport. He also owns the White Sox. I think he goes to bed every night clutching his Paul Konerko World Series ball, and he doesn't think much about those 6 championship banners hanging in the United Center because he just doesn't really care that much.
My God.
I'm also a White Sox fan. The White Sox are garbage, too. It's like, at least do something for me, Jerry Reinsdorf. I have not had a good sports team to root for in like 7 or 8 years before this Bears turnaround, which has been delightful. But I need something out of the Bulls or the White Sox here. Give me something, Jerry.
Oh, my. It seems like Jerry Reinsdorf needs to get some foresight, and the best way to get some foresight is with Simple Contacts, the most convenient way to renew your contact lens prescription and reorder your brand of contacts from anywhere in minutes. Instead of heading to the doctor year after year just to renew your prescription for something you wear every day, you can do it on your own time and terms in just a few minutes. This is vision care for the 21st century. If you need to renew your prescription, you just take a 5-minute Simple Contact vision test online. It'll be reviewed by a licensed doctor and you receive a renewed prescription and you reorder your contacts. All you need is your current contacts, an internet connection, and 10 feet of space. Even if you're totally out of contacts, they've got an option for you too. Why is Simple Contacts awesome? It's because it's convenient. It is fast, reliable. It's a 5-star experience. It offers choice and it saves you money. Look, we're all trying to find a way to scrape by in this world. We're all trying to find a way to make sure and, make sure our time is valued and make sure that our money is valued as well. And Simple Contacts does that every single time that you use it. Here's what I can offer you. You're going to get $20 off of your first order with Simple Contacts if you use the promo code GameTheory20. Again, you're going to get $20 off of your contacts at simplecontacts.com/GameTheory20, or you enter that code GameTheory20 at checkout. That's GameTheory20 at checkout. Look, this isn't a replacement for your periodic full eye health exam, but what Simple Contacts does is it's going to make your life just so much easier. It's going to make your life better, and it's going to make your life simpler. Go to simplecontacts.com/GameTheory20. Our second sponsor today is RX Bar. We are Obviously, big fans of RX Bar here. It's a whole food protein bar. Their bars are made with real whole ingredients. They want to be transparent and upfront with their customers, which is why they label the core ingredients on the front and the flavor components on the back. Beyond being a go-to snack that checks off a number of nutritional boxes, RX Bars actually taste delicious. They found that creating a bar from real whole food ingredients actually tastes better than anything else out there. They don't need fillers, additives, chemicals, or sugar. They just need the simple ingredients that go into RX Bar every single time that they make one. They build things the right way. They believe in the power of transparency, and they let the core ingredients do all the talking. They're great for a number of occasions. Breakfast on the go, snack at the office to push it through that 3 p.m. slump. You throw the RX Bar in your bag for a plane ride. You toss it in your backpack for a bike ride. They come in 14 delicious flavor varieties as well: mango, pineapple, chocolate, hazelnut, peanut butter and berries, chocolate peanut butter, and coffee chocolate. Plus, they have seasonal flavors as well. They're also debuting RX Nut Butter, which contains a few simple and similar ingredients like egg whites, fruits, and nuts. They have, it's squeezable, it's spreadable, it pairs great with fruit, rice cakes, pretzels, or straight out of the pouch. They have honey cinnamon peanut butter, or vanilla almond butter. I'm a big fan of RX Bar. I eat them pretty regularly. To go and use RX Bar and go support the show here, go to rxbar.com/game theory. That's rxbar.com/game theory, GAMETHEORY. And what's going to happen is you're going to get 25% off of your first order, and you're going to be able to enjoy RX Bar with as much verve and vigor as I do. So go to rxbar.com/game theory and use that promo code game theory at checkout. Ricky, let's talk about something more enjoyable. What around the NBA have you enjoyed so far this season?
Yeah, I think it's been a good year in general. I think the rookie class is what catches my eye immediately, just because we spent so much time covering these players in college and for me, even in high school, in the run-up to this draft. So seeing Luka just, match, or even, I would say he's even exceeded the hype in a lot of ways. And I had him number one on my board from the day after the 2017 draft. He's lived up to the hype through and through, maybe even exceeded it. He's been phenomenal. Jaren Jackson, the offensive evolution of Jaren Jackson has just been tremendous. You saw it in bits and pieces at Michigan State, but he never really totally put it together to be a dominant college player at all. Well, it's just more proof that a lot of players can be so much better in the NBA than in college, just because of the spacing, because of the talent around him, because of better coaching schemes. I think Jaren Jackson has been a revelation. I had him number 2 on my board coming into the draft, and he's been awesome this year. I mean, he looks like a total stud, I think, in the future. And if you just want to talk about, some non-rookies, maybe this is a little bit of a common answer at this point, but oh my God, Pascal Siakam, man. Pascal Siakam, the way that he has evolved coming out of New Mexico State, to be the type of Forman who can handle the ball. He was putting some dribble moves on the Warriors.
His spin move is nasty.
Like, what the hell?
His spin move is nasty. Like, that thing he can blow by anyone with that thing in the NBA right now. It's crazy. And I saw Pascal. I haven't really talked about Pascal on the podcast at all yet, and I really should. I saw him this summer out here at UCLA, just playing with, guys like Kevin Durant and, Buddy Hield and Dante Exum. I came away thinking, this dude looks like every bit of as good as those guys are, if not better. He looked awesome when I was down there.
He's the third best player on the Raptors. To me, the Raptors they're the breakout team of the league, obviously at 20-5 to this point. And everything just fell into place for Toronto this year, and that only happens when you have young guys take that next step forward. I think that, he's the biggest piece in that equation. So watching Siakam has been awesome, and, I think that this is here to stay. I mean, we talk about his offensive development. Yeah. He's better on defense than he is on offense for all this vast improvement he's made offensively.
Can we talk about the Spurs real quick? How do the Spurs trade Kawhi Leonard and end up with none of Pascal Siakam, OG Anunoby, DeLon Wright, Norman Powell. Like, Powell hasn't even been, like, amazing. Like, he's in and out of their rotation. Like, Fred VanVleet obviously couldn't be traded because he had just signed that deal. But, like, how do you... And plus, you give up Danny Green in the process, too. So, like, this wasn't even just moving Kawhi. This was moving Danny Green, who's started every game for the Raptors this season, averaged 10 points a game. He's shooting 43% from three. He's been pretty good defensively. Like, it eludes me to how we ended up in this situation for the Spurs. And, like, I guess part of it is, you know, they wanted to compete now and they thought DeMar was the guy that could help them compete now. And, you know, they're sitting at 11-12. I think they're probably going to be right around that 500 mark the whole way and maybe make a run at the playoffs at the end of the season. Like, I don't know how you come away from trading one of the 5 best players in the league in Kawhi Leonard and end up with none of Toronto's good young guys. Other than Pirtle. And Pirtle's like fine. He's
fine. Yeah, he's averaging 4 points a game this year, by the way, in case you're wondering how impactful he's been. That was like a D package for them back. Like maybe a borderline F. They did really bad in that trade, and it was because they valued the short-term boost that DeRozan would give them. I mean, you could almost see how the logic works in their mind. Like, I don't know how many games the Spurs won last year, off the top of my head, but they were pretty decent. They didn't have Kawhi the whole year, so you're thinking just adding DeRozan to that mix, maybe that bumps you up. DeRozan did have, you know, a career year, his last season in Toronto, but holy cow, was that a one-sided trade for the Raptors, so much so that even if Kawhi does leave, and Kawhi would be crazy to leave at this point, I think, just because they're so well set up for him. If I'm a Raptors fan too, him, like, figuring out the shoe endorsement thing already, instead of that lingering into his free agency, that just gives me even more faith that he's going to stay a Raptor. Obviously, a lot can change. Like, I don't know. I have no inside information on this. And the Clippers is another team we could talk about. Them being one of the surprise teams in the NBA. You know, that will be a real pull for Kawhi, I'm sure, come free agency time. But even in a world where Kawhi leaves, this is still an A-plus trade for Toronto. I mean, they are definitely the favorites to go to the finals right now. It's not a shoo-in by any stretch. I think that, you know, there's at least 4 teams in the East that can get there. But they're the clear favorite because of their depth, because I think Nurse might be the best coach in the NBA. Whenever I hear Nurse talk, I'm just like, this guy gets it more than anyone. And then you have Kawhi being, like, pretty much all the way back to being, you know, a top 5 player in the league, the exact type of player you want to be the face of the franchise, the type of player that you want to build any modern team around. Is a two-way wing who hits threes, who just competes on both ends, isn't selfish. The Raptors have been really awesome, and, you know, I thought they were going to be good coming into this season. I keep saying to my friends privately, I wish I would have put my money where my mouth was, because I really did like Toronto, especially at the odds they were getting coming into the season, and they've been amazing. It's been the best story in the league so far.
Yeah, it really is just like a super, super fun story that the Raptors are good. Yeah, and Pascal is one of my favorite stories in the NBA. I didn't really like that trade. Like, I didn't like that pick really at the time. Whenever Masai selected him, I was flat wrong. Like, I thought that Siakam was like a second round guy. They took him at the end of the first, and if I remember correctly, they took him over Scal, right? And I was like, well, why would you do that? What makes sense here? And what I've learned since then, and why I've gotten just a lot better at this in the last few years, is just the work ethic. Like, Pascal Siakam, from everyone who, like, knows him and talks to him and everything, apparently this dude is just like a wild worker, and you could really expect him to improve in such a significant way that it was reasonable to make the bet on him, as opposed to making the bet on other players.
Yeah, and you know what sort of jumps out, I guess, is the difference between Scal and Siakam from a scouting perspective, even beyond the work ethic, is just like Siakam can really, really move. Yeah. Right? So, like, you knew you had that base there, that he can fly up and down the court, really move laterally. I think the Raptors probably also saw something similar in Bruno Caboclo, which didn't work out for him. But it's like the process was right, even if the results were wrong.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, like Pascal's a quick twitch athlete, whereas Scal has kind of been proven to not be to be like more of a slow twitch guy. And I think that is one of the most like underrated things that you find in scouting now. You got to find guys who are like quick twitch, who can move laterally, who can react to things happening around them.
And when you do that, what is Siakam? 6'9", 230, 240 with a plus 7 foot wingspan? I mean, you just have the basis for a good player when you add in that work ethic. You see the individual skill development with his ball handling, with his shooting this year. And, you know, he's a hell of a player. I was playing 2K against a friend yesterday, and Pascal Siakam was rated like an 84 or an 85, and he was like, who's this guy? I'm like, He deserves to be rated that good.
Yeah, he's been awesome. He's been so good recently. Yeah, even at the time, like when I wrote about this for The Athletic, I basically just wrote, like, this is a smart gamble for the Raptors, and it was a short-sighted move for the Spurs, and it's kind of borne itself out. Let's get out of here and talk some NBA draft stuff. Ricky, you follow the NBA draft about as much as I do. Tell me where you're at here with all of this. I will start by just asking you, what do you want to talk about with the NBA draft? Because there's so many different directions to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're both in agreement that Zion's the best player.
Yeah, let me do this real quick. I have a top 100 board, my new top 100 board coming out tomorrow. Within, you'll find why Zion is number one. I've talked about him being number one in previous podcasts for me, but I'm actually gonna I've talked to NBA executives and all that stuff, and actually quote unquote report it out why Zion is number one. Also, I have eyeballs, so that helps. Zion is definitely number one.
Did you have Ayton or Luka as your number one last year?
I had DeAndre.
Now, how would you compare Zion to DeAndre in terms of a number one prospect?
Oh man, that's a good question. I
don't really want to rehash the evaluation so much. It's just question, how strong of a number one overall prospect is Zion? Which I do think there's room for debate there.
Oh man, that's a good question, because I think Ayton is going to be a Hall of Famer. I'm on that boat. And I think that Luka's in that discussion as well. I had them 1A and 1B. I had Ayton slightly higher. I think they're both going to be absolutely unbelievable players. I'd probably put Ayton, or probably put Zion right within their class right now. Maybe a touch higher, if only because of the age and the athleticism. But it comes with the caveat that I do really need to learn more about his medicals, and I need to learn more about what people think of his injury history over the last 18 months. They're just talking to executives already, they want to see more. Basically, they want to learn more about that. But right now they're also just kind of yeah, this is a no-brainer. This dude's a freak. Take him.
Yeah. So from my own perspective, I think he's a cut below Luka. That's easy to say on December 4th, 2018, when Luka's averaging 20 points a game as a rookie and has the Mavs sort of in the playoff hunt already.
Yeah.
But that is the big question with Zion to me is how strong of a number one prospect is he? Because he does have some holes in his game. I just love watching Zion play, and he just sort of recalibrates your understanding of what a basketball player can be, in a sense, and that's why it's so much fun. Now, I put Zion in tier 1. I don't have anyone in tier 2. I think that's how big the drop-off is between him and the next best guy.
That's interesting.
I have Reddish as the second best player in the draft. I had Reddish number 1 in my initial board in June, right after the 18th draft. I always put out a board the next day. Reddish was number 1 for me because I saw him on the EYBL, and I saw him at, more importantly, USA Basketball Camp. And I thought, this guy just has he reminded me a little bit of a less explosive Tracy McGrady, in that he has all the talent in the world. Someone at 6'9" should not be that smooth. As a ball handler, as a shooter, as someone who's just, coordinated, coming around screens, moving on and off the ball. But then, the question with him is the competitive fire. Does he always want to be locked in to be great?
Yeah.
Very similar to McGrady. I don't think he has that upper echelon athleticism that McGrady had. I mean, McGrady was a goddamn freak athlete. Reddish is a good athlete. He's more smooth than explosive.
Yep.
And I know that Reddish has no-showed several times for Duke this year. my friends who are not basketball writers but who just love the game are like watching Duke games this year to see Zion, and they're like, Reddish might be kind of a buster. Like, this is the third bad game we've seen from him when we're watching Duke, and I get that. To me, Reddish is going to be better in the pros than in the league. I think he has very, very high upside as a role player, just as a 3-and-D guy, potentially, with also some star equity as well. So Reddish is my number 2, and then I'm still sticking with RJ at 3. I'm not totally sold on Nasir Little. I think Little's skill is very unrefined at this point. I do like the look of Little's jumper. He's going to need to make major strides as a ball handler, as a shooter, and as someone who just, like, plays with poise and with, like, a certain level of calmness to his game that I just don't see right now. Maybe it will happen by the time he's, 23, 24. Hell, that's a long time from now. I'd have Nasir Little number 4 with Bol as number 5. Barrett, I don't think, is a great prospect. I do think that RJ Barrett can be an all-star in the NBA, if not a superstar. So that's kind of where I'm at the top of this draft right now. And then after number 5, it gets tricky for me. I like Kevin Porter, but I have no idea what to make of Romeo Langford. I have no idea what to make of Quentin Grimes. I have no idea what to make of, I can't even pronounce the French kid's name.
Sekou Doumbouya?
Doumbouya, I have no idea. So, I don't love this draft, but I like it. And I think that, there's already that top tier has started to form. And it'll be interesting to see how the hierarchy shapes out as the season goes on.
So, like, here's where I'm at. I have Nasir at 4. I have Reddish at 3. I have Barrett at 2. I have Zion at 1. I can parse through that at some point later on. I don't like the range from 5 to like 12 or so. I don't really. I just don't think. I don't like the range from 5 till even like maybe 25 even. I'm just not like, I don't think that those picks are going to be marginally as valuable as what an average draft is. Like, I have DeAndre Hunter at number 5 right now.
Hell yeah.
Like, DeAndre Hunter is a stud. He's going to be a really, really good NBA player. But if you're at number 5, you want a guy who can be like a star, right? Like, or at least has that potential, right?
Yeah.
I don't really see that with him. Like, I have Kevin Porter at like top 10, top 7, something like that. Like, Kevin Porter is still a big unknown in a lot of ways. Like, I like Kevin Porter, but I don't think we know what his exact level as a shooter is yet. He's good. I think he wants to defend, but he's still not like super aware of where he needs to be defensively a lot of the time. So like, I don't know what to think of him. Like Keldon Johnson, Romeo Langford, Quentin Grimes. We don't really know what those.
Grimes is so bad.
We don't know what those guys are. Like Quentin Grimes, the problem with Grimes is that, like, A, Bill Self doesn't trust him, and B, I don't know if he's bad. Like, I don't know if he's bad. I just know that he's struggling right now, and it's kind of an unforgiving spot for him, right?
Right.
Because, like, in Michigan, against Michigan State, he was really good.
We were there.
Yeah, against Vermont, he was really good. And now, in their last 4 games, he's shot, like, 20% from the field. And hasn't shown a ton in terms of ball handling and everything. So, like, it might just be a bad fit because he's not as bad of a player as he's shown in the last 4 games. Like, he's nowhere near that bad.
Couple things. Kevin Porter, my question on him is his game only flashy or is it also functional? Like, his highlights are nasty. You're going to see some step back threes. You're going to see some up and under acrobatic finishes.
Everything that he does in terms of highlights is like immediately translatable to the NBA.
Completely agree. But the nuance of the game, does Kevin Porter have that? I'm not saying he doesn't. I mean, it's just way too early to tell, I think, from people in our position. And I like his frame, too. I think, he plays like a Seattle player in a lot of ways, like Jamal Crawford, Zach LaVine, even Nate Robin, Isaiah Thomas, just in terms of that ability to create in isolation and basically like put you on a vine, like embarrass you with how nasty his moves are.
I went and talked to him last week. He's awesome. I like Kevin Porter. I like him as a dude. Like, I like him as a prospect. He's a lot bigger too. Like, you see him in person, he looks like a 6'6" wide receiver. Like, he is a big dude.
He's a big dude. He just has the frame that Crawford and Levine don't have. I mean, he's already 220, whereas those guys are like sub 200 pounds. So I like Porter, but I still need to see more of him. My thing with Grimes is like, the book on Grimes is like he's really solid across the board, but like where does he stand out? He doesn't stand out with size. He doesn't stand out as an elite passer or an elite shooter. He's just someone who's like supposed to be focused and tough and smart on both ends, who can do a little bit of everything, but maybe that's not enough to be a top 10 pick in this draft, so I don't know. It seems like the guy who I haven't heard you talk about yet is Bol. I have Bol number 5. I think Bol could be number 2.
I wrote a lot about Bol last week. Bol is... I have him at 13. He's going to be the swing guy. Like, no one is going to have any sort of consistency on him. No one's going to have any sort of, like, great feel for him going into this thing. I don't know, man. Like,
so without pulling back the covers too much on it, if you could provide any insight on this, is that a Sam evaluation? Is that you talking to people around the league?
Oh, yeah. Like, I have no problem pulling back the cover. I've published 3,000 words on Bol already. So he's a really bad defender. Genuinely, he is awful on defense. He also might be, like, an elite offensive prospect, because I actually do believe he's like a 40% 3-point shooter, which I think gives him a higher floor than what I think other people think. Like, I talked to some people who think like he could be out of the league like in 4 years, and I don't really think that's the case, because I think he can just shoot it. He makes more like highlight plays than any player in college basketball that isn't named Zion, but he's so bad on defense, and I don't really see the potential for him to like become a good defender in space. And I don't really love the frame, and I don't know if he's going to be able to keep putting weight on the frame to where I don't know what the ceiling is defensively. I don't know what and centers are so impactful defensively, both good and bad, that I really worry on what he can do for like a high end NBA team. Like, I talked to someone yesterday who we'll say consults for NBA teams, and he was like, maybe this guy is like Brook Lopez. Like, maybe he's like a really, really good 3-point shooter who can struggle defensively in the modern NBA and is going to be a very situational prospect. I think that's what I keep coming back to. Bol, you can rank Bol in the top 5 if you're Milwaukee, like where you run like some very conservative defensive scheme where you play drop coverage. If you're Portland, where you play drop coverage with your big and your entire goal is to contest shots at the basket with your big, I don't think you can have Bol in the like lottery really, even if you're Golden State and you want to switch all kinds of defensive coverages, or if you're teams like even the Celtics like want to switch a good amount of defensive coverages and be versatile defensively. Like, I guess that you could say he could like replace Aaron Baines, because they don't really do that with Baines on the floor. They play such like a different defensive structure, but it's all schematics based, it's all situation based, it's all scheme based. So like I don't really know what to do with Bol.
There's just so much to unravel with Bol. First of all, even though he sucks on defense, he does have a 7'8" wingspan, and he is top 15 in the country in block percentage. Now,
he definitely blocks shots. He blocks a lot of jump shots. One thing that was worth noting in what I wrote so he had 17 blocks in his first 6 games. 7 of those 17 blocks were on jump shots.
Maybe that's more valuable in today's game.
Is it, though? Because it's harder to close down space when you're a big like that in the NBA, because you have to go out the extra 4 feet to contest the 3.
And you risk to get burned as well.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, is like, who knows what NBA defenses are going to look like 5 to 8 years from now? Like, if you watch the Celtics play the Sixers in the playoffs, the Celtics were kind of playing a lot of zone. If you're playing zone, some sort of hybrid zone in the league with Bol, imagine if you get him next to Porzingis in New York, and you got 2-7-3 guys.
Oh, you're getting burned every defensive possession from 3.
You think so?
Yeah. Every team is just going to put them in consistent ball screens, and just make it a mess, I think.
Highly possible. To me, Bol does not look like a conventional prospect, and that is why people are soured on him. Now, of course, Zion doesn't either. Zion's approach is so professional, and his charisma is so magnetic, and his efficiency is so off the charts, that I think Zion has silenced all the doubters. Bol, I mean, people question his approach, I think, not just his lateral movement. There's been questions about his motor since he's sort of developed into a top recruit. But to me, his impact is just so exaggerated. Like, even though it doesn't look like he's giving great effort sometimes, he's still putting up huge numbers. He's productive, even while playing the game at his own speed sometimes. And I do just think that combination of length and shooting, like, to me, the volume on the shooting is what I want to see more of out of Bol. I want him to shoot 5 or 6 threes a game, which I think will happen at the NBA level. It's not going to happen in college, because college coaches just don't use their big men that way. And then I think he can be a really valuable player. I like Bol at number 5. You like him at 13. That is going to be one of the most fascinating draft debates as it gets closer. Because,
and by the way, I will say this: most NBA executives that I've talked to think he's going like somewhere in the 5 to 10 range. So they're probably a little bit closer to where you are than where I am.
Yeah. It's like someone else has to step up.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. Like, we need someone to, like, figure out how to be good in this class. I want to point out some of the guys that I have moved up. You'll see how far, I guess, tomorrow, whenever this gets released. Lugens Dort out of Arizona State is slid up quite a bit. Brandon Clark at Gonzaga. I will tell you, like, I have Brandon Clark at number 20 right now. I don't know if he is an offensive fit in the NBA. He's just such a good defender that, like, he might be Andre Robertson, and I'm okay with that at number 20 in this draft. But, like, I don't know what to do with him either. Nickeil Alexander-Walker has moved up. Let's see. KZ Apala has really moved up. KZ's been very, very good. I have moved up Shmori Pons a little bit. AJ Lawson and Iggy Brazdeikis, I think, are worth pointing out. What have you thought of some of the, like, under the radar freshmen so far?
Yeah, I'm not. Let me look at some names here, and I can try to figure out, who I'm buying, who I'm selling. I like Simi.
Yeah, I have him as like a borderline first right now. Actually,
I would take him over a lot of guys in this class because I'm trying to make the Siakam comparison with him here. Is he that much of a quick twitch athlete?
I've seen him in person a few times now. Not like Siakam. His reactivity isn't like Siakam's is, but I see where you're going with it, and I don't think it's, like, insane.
I got Jarrett Culver at 11.
Sure, that's reasonable.
I thought that might be crazy to an extent, but I just really like the poise with which he plays, the fact that he's taken on the initiator burden at Texas Tech this year while raising his efficiency. Not only his usage, but his efficiency. He's just shows a lot of things to me that I think proves he can be a good offensive guard in the NBA. So I'm liking Culver.
I'll say this about Culver real quick. The only reason I didn't bring him up earlier, I've moved him up a little bit, but like I had him 19 to start the year. So like what Ricky's saying is right. Jarrett Culver's awesome. And like the only reason I didn't bring him up earlier is because I had him a little bit higher and didn't really think of him as a riser. But Jarrett's great, and I'm a big fan of his game.
Ja Morant is just
stud.
You think? Where you got him?
9.
I put him 13, and I thought that would be too high, and now it looks too low.
Yeah, I don't think 13's too low. Not honestly, 9 is the highest. Is like upper echelon of probably where he should be. I'll be honest. Yeah, he's just so good. I talked to him yesterday too. He is a really, really interesting kid. Had an offer from South Carolina and decided to go to Murray State because he thought that it felt like home whenever he stepped on the campus. So I love dudes like that. I'm trying to think, who else do we got here? I've moved Charlie Brown onto my board. Shout out Charlie Brown at St. Joe's. I have moved... I'm trying to think of some of the guys I've moved on to my top 100. Najee Marshall at Xavier. I think he's sneaky good. Vic Law at Northwestern's averaging like 17, I think like 6 and 3. And
we go see him tonight.
Yeah, shooting like 40% from three, and he's also like 6'6" with a 7-foot wingspan. So that's really interesting. He's always been a guy that's been on my radar that I sneaky like. Tyshawn Alexander at Creighton. He's been super fun, kind of like a 6'3" combo-y guard. Great creator though, who's shooting really well. I have him like in the 70s right now. I want to see where the shooting levels off before I go crazy with him. But like he is 100% on my radar. Some of the guys that, like some of the freshmen, I guess, that have stood out, Taylor Horton-Tucker, let's see, Andrew Nembhard has been okay at Florida, I think. He had a rough start. His first couple games, I think he struggled, but he's kind of found his level a little bit. Moses Brown still is not on my board because I only rank freshmen that are in the top 50. Let's see, is there anyone else?
What about Naz Reid?
Oh, yeah, I've got Naz Reid like at 26, and I don't feel great about it. He's been struggling with an ankle injury. I think that's the reason his numbers don't look particularly good. He also likes to float, and that's another problem. He's really not very good defensively. He
can't move. He's like Bol. He's similar to Bol in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he's just very, very skilled. Very, very skilled. A good shooter. A very, very talented ball handler for his size. There's a lot to like about him. I just want to see more from him when he gets fully healthy.
Yeah, he's going to be an interesting guy. I mean, you'll find mock drafts with him in like the top 10.
Yeah, that's tough.
I totally don't agree with it, but I do think that it is a reflection on just like his offensive skill. He can really do some things that are made for like 25-second clips on Instagram, where you're like, "Holy cow, this guy can really move." So
yeah,
I don't know. I don't think it's a very good draft. I think that it's going to be better than next year's draft, most likely.
Yep, that's the problem.
But next year's draft might be deeper.
So
with next year's draft is all the guys who are evaluated at the top of the draft in terms of recruits. Like, those guys are kind of obviously not really good NBA fits, like Vernon Carey, like Isaiah Stewart. Even Wiseman has never done much for me, like Matthew Hurt. But I think, there's some guys below them who will be pretty good fits. Okoro, Maxey. So
Jaden McDaniels is like kind of in that top tier now. I think that, well, now that Anthony Edwards is reclassified, I would have Edwards at number 1, but I think I'd have Jaden at number 2 right now.
Me too. So we're in total agreement on that.
Yeah. The other thing about that is, too, like the 2020 recruiting class in basketball, I think that you might see some of those guys reclassify into 2019, seeing...
That class is stacked.
Yeah, seeing the potential weakness of it all. That, I think, is something that, realistically, a lot of players should look into.
Yeah.
Beyond that, man, I think that's about all I got for you. Tell me what's going on in your life. Tell me where I can find your work. Tell me all about the Ricky O'Donnell experience right now.
Yeah. You can find all my work at sbnation.com. Writing draft stuff, writing college hoops, writing some NBA. I'm a jack of all trades on the basketball side at SB Nation. Not to give this away too much, but I might have an Anthony Edwards thing coming. Maybe I talked to him, maybe I didn't. I don't know. We'll see. So that could be coming out in the next week or two. I'm really excited about Anthony Edwards. You'll also have some draft stuff from me as this all goes on. And in terms of Bulls discussion, I have a new Bulls podcast this year with Jason Patt called Cash Considerations.
It's a fantastic name.
We're very emotional and very snarky. I already said some things on the podcast yesterday. I'm like, I sound like a crazy person. I need to slow down. But, we give it to you real on the Cash Considerations podcast. So if you like the Bulls discussion here, you follow us there. And I have a college basketball podcast as well this year with Mike Rutherford called Palpable Buzz, which is really fun. Mike Rutherford's the best. So
I forgot that's what it was named. I've actually been listening to it. I forgot that's what it was named.
Palpable Buzz, man. I got Cash Considerations and Palpable Buzz.
Oh, no. Oh, Rothstein. What a mess. Go to The Athletic. I'll have a top 100 board tomorrow for you. I will have some other features going up over the course of this week as well. Like I said, I talked to John Morant, talked to Kevin Porter. I have a few other interviews scheduled out for later this week. Other than that, go subscribe to The Athletic. Subscribe to this podcast. Leave ratings. Leave reviews. Leave everything that you can to support the podcast. Go buy Simple Context. Go buy RX bars. Go buy anything that I advertise on the podcast because it does really help support the show. I think that's about all I got for you this time, though. Until next time, we'll talk soon. Bye.